Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a warm welcome to the Oasis Focus on Finance show during this blessed month of Ramadan. I'm your host Hassan Motala, and during this month we will be looking to demystify investments on this show. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be looking to discuss matters around financial planning, wealth management, and the world of investments. If you have any questions or concerns around investments or financial planning that you'd like us to discuss, please SMS us your questions or email us or even send us a Twitter. The contact details are appearing on screen. Today we are talking to investment analysts from Oasis Group Holdings, Michael Swingler, Isma-el Ebrahim and Fahad Shaikh. And the topic we'll be discussing today is on infrastructure spending in South Africa. With me today we have investment analysts from Oasis Group Holdings. I have Michael Swingler, Isma-el Ebrahim and Fahad Shaikh. Gentlemen, good afternoon and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Welcome once again to the Oasis Focus on Finance show. Now, I think obviously our focus on today's topic is going to be around infrastructure spending. But before we get to that, Fahad, last week you did speak quite a bit around RCL Foods. Now, during the past week, there was quite a bit of news flow around the anti-dumping duties on chicken imports into South Africa. How does this now impact the South African poultry producers and the South African consumer?
Hassan, if you look at the debate around anti-dumping issues, I think it's been going on for some time from a media perspective. So I think it's important to put it into a historical perspective to see what it's all about. If you go back just 2 years, poultry imports into South Africa made up almost 27% of total production. That's massive. And most of those imports were coming in either from Brazil or from some of the European countries like Netherlands, UK or Germany. And the interesting point is that a lot of these imports were the leg portions of the chicken. So not the entire bird, but just the leg portion. Why that's important is, if you look at consumption trends in developed markets like the US and Europe, they prefer the breast piece of the bird rather than the leg piece. Whereas in South Africa, the leg piece is preferred. So according to the South African Poultry Association, what's been going on is that a lot of those leg cuts or the leg pieces of chickens were being dumped into South Africa at very low prices, in some cases even prices below cost. And that's been one of the key issues around the anti-dumping on the poultry, within the poultry side.
And if I can just add to that, the consequences of this import dumping of chicken is they're quite severe. If you look at the main consequence, firstly it's unfair trade. And I think that's the important aspect of it. And that results in significant pressure on South African producers. And in the last couple of years, we've seen a number of producers having to close down their business. So that leads to job losses. The other issue is really quality for the consumer. With the imported product, you cannot verify the production process and the logistic process or the cold chain of that. So those are very severe consequences for South Africa as a country, for our food security in the longer term, and then also for the consumer in terms of the quality of the food.
Sure. Well, keeping in mind the factors that Michael just spoke about, I think that's one of the key reasons why DTI did decide to impose anti-dumping duties on Europe. That basically includes countries like Netherlands, UK and Germany. I think if you look at we view that as being very positive for South Africa, especially if you put it into context of food security. At the end of the day, as South Africans, we want a local high-quality producer of poultry, and we don't want to be dependent on imports for all our poultry consumption. If you think about it, if there's a shortage of poultry in international markets, it's going to impact how much product is coming into South Africa, and secondly, it will also impact the pricing of the products coming into South Africa. So from a sustainability perspective, I think it's very important that there's a level playing field between our South African producers and international producers, and that the local producers are likely to offer you more sustainable, much higher quality poultry going forward. Last week we spoke about, I think, RCL Foods as being one of those companies which benefits from the African growth story. But even if you put it in the South African context, I think it's one of those countries which has one of the highest quality, production facilities, which are comparable to players from a global perspective. So I think just these anti-dumping duties coming into effect, which levels the playing field, and I think it positions RCL Foods very well over the long term to add value, from a food security perspective to South Africans, to the consumers, and at the end of the day towards shareholders as well as not to forget the employment that these industries create within South Africa.
I think, Isma-el, coming now to obviously the infrastructure that we're talking about. Now, this time of the year, it's that winter chills are in place. Everyone's, putting their winter gear out, and you can see all the woolen hats and everything is coming out. But at the same time also, we've seen it since 2008, that this time of the year when the severe winter chills come into play, it does have a constraint or puts a bit of pressure on our electricity system in South Africa. Now, we've seen quite a bit talked about it in the media at the moment. How does this impact our economy and the major industries in South Africa?
Sure. Look, if we contextualize it and we go back about 40 years ago, we'll find that South Africa at that point in time had significant electricity capacity. And at that point, we had, our electricity prices relative to the rest of the world internationally were very low. And so when we had that capacity, I think a decision was taken and there was an underinvestment for the 30 years that followed after that. And so from that point of view, during that period, we experienced significant growth in our mining, in our manufacturing, and in our industries. So what's happened is, subsequently, with that underinvestment and the growth that followed, you've actually had pressure now building onto the system. And so from that point of view, while people experience these issues in their everyday life, we experience load shedding, we have to cut back at certain points in time. If we look at the impact on industries, for example, your mining industry, which consumes about 15% of Eskom's capacity at any given point, that's a hugely energy-intensive sector, and they've had to cut back their production by almost 10%. It's R1 billion a day industry for South Africa. So if our economy obviously is impacted in that way, a revenue generator actually has to cut back. So, but having said that, our government, our leaders are obviously investing in infrastructure going forward, but during that time, we can also play a role. The example of our Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he set an example where there's no reason for us to be excessive. We must respect our rizq. And from that point of view, if we follow that example, we switch off the lights in the evening, unnecessary lights, usage of unnecessary electricity, we also actually help preserve some capacity that very soon, inshallah, will be alleviated.
So definitely conservation and preservation, making sure we utilize our resources effectively does go a long way.